welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. Just a few minutes ago, the Arab Summit, or the 27th round of the Arab Summit, wrapped up its activities with a declaration during a one day, because that summit was supposed to take place in 2 days, but rather it was limited to just one day. The Arab leaders have discussed a number of issues, an array of different files, from the most important developments that are occurring in the Middle East. Top of them was the issue of terror. In the final declaration read by the Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait, he asserted that the Arab countries refuses any interference in the internal affairs, particularly from Iran, and called on concrete principles of solidarity and integration among the Arab countries in order to be able to face the surrounding challenges. Opening the talks, Egypt Prime Minister Sharif Ismail, on behalf of President Fattah al-Sisi, has called on an Arab strategy of struggle against terrorism. He rather called for unity among the Arab nations in order to be able to counter this particular threat, not just for our region, but rather for the whole world. Mauritanian head of state محمد ولد عبد العزيز, who is hosting, of course, the summit. It is held in Nouakchott, or the Mauritanian capital, also slammed the blind violence of terrorism as well as foreign intervention that is feeding instability in the Arab world. Other issues, of course, were discussed, among them the development in many crises in the region, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and others. Of course, a call of solidarity, a strong call of solidarity was called by every Arab leader who attended this summit in order to really be able to face a number of challenges. We'll be discussing this and more in our episode today. Let me first welcome our distinguished guests here, Ambassador محمد انيس سالم, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, and thank you very much for joining us. And before proceeding on with our discussion, first let's have a quick report on the Arab Summit, or this round of the Arab Summit, and we'll come back for discussion. Right, welcome back, and ahead with our discussion. Let me first again welcome our guest, Ambassador Muhammad Annis Salim, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, and thank you for coming, sir, today. And let me start by asking you, how did you read this year's 27th round of the Arab Summit? How significant it was, the timing of it, and how successful was it?
Big questions.
Yes.
I think tonight you'll find that the reaction probably across the Arab world is there is a sense of disappointment with the meeting. Disappointment in the level of participation, disappointment in the results, disappointment in the repetition of the inability of the Arab system to rise to the challenges that the region is facing. The Arab Summit was never part of the charter of the Arab League. It was an innovation that was introduced by President Nasser in 1964. Basically to move the Arab League forward, to make it more capable of taking important decisions, to make it more capable of handling crises. And it was more or less, if you look at the history, it was more or less used in these two ways. So you have a lot of crisis meetings of the Arab League. Then you had a phase where it could be institutionalized, and that you would start having regular meetings. We saw this year that didn't work, because Morocco, who was supposed to host the meeting, declined, saying that, and probably they were correct in saying that their diagnosis was that the Arab system was not ready to face up to the challenges, and that they would not host a pro forma meeting just for appearances. apart from the fact that holding a meeting in Mauritania was a wonderful experience for the Mauritanian people, because they live on the fringes of the Arab world, they have very little to do with the Arab system. There is a sense of alienation between many of the countries of North Africa and countries of the East. Apart from that, it's difficult to see individual value in this meeting. We don't see the level of participation that should have been there. We don't see a serious tackling of issues. The summit has deteriorated into a television opportunity for a few hours. There is no really serious debate about any issue. There is no treatment of even of some of the bilateral problems that exist between some countries and other countries. Usually the summit is a good opportunity for leaders to meet and at least solve some of these frictions and misunderstandings and get into a more useful operational kind of mode. None of this has happened. So I think that, you know, have a sense of disappointment tonight, and I think they have a good reason for this.
Yeah. Yes, that if we can speak about the event itself, you're quite right here. But if we can really speak about the reasons. Now, let's speak about the points and the reasons that you have mentioned here, sir. One of them was the inability of the Arab countries to fulfill the aspiration, or what was supposed to be expected from them. Of course, we are seeing the situation in the Middle East, and it is not very proper. None of our countries is in its best shape. If we can just start to speak about point by point the reason behind that it could not be held in what we aspired for.
People would say that there just isn't the political will on the part of the member states. You have a group of states that has evolved from where they were when the League was established after the Second World War. And, you know, there were 7 states at that stage, mostly royal states, looking towards decolonization, looking towards creating a new entity, a degree of non-alignment, what degree to align with the rest of the East. That whole world has gone away. That world has ended. There's no more Cold War. There are no more colonies. So those wars are over. And what you have in their place now is the phenomena of collapsed states. You have a number of Arab states that have completely collapsed when you look at Libya, when you look at Yemen, when you look at Syria, when you look at Iraq, when you look at even in Lebanon without a president now for the 2nd year running or something. So you see that the Arab states themselves are in a bad way. You also see that the Gulf Cooperation Council started working independently, creating common interests, common mechanisms for their cooperation outside the Arab League, a common military force for the Gulf, the Desert Shield. So you have a sort of fragmentation of the region that without the will or the resources to rebuild it. So it, you know, this is a stage in Arab history. It's a sad stage. Hopefully it will pass. Hopefully the cost will not be too high. But it requires a lot of wisdom. It requires a lot of energy also to transcend this, to see other opportunities, to see other mechanisms, to rejuvenate the whole area of Arab cooperation.
Perhaps when the Arab League was first started, it started because, as you said, there were certain for an Arab unity and integrity. Now we're speaking about different reasons, totally different reasons and different crises even, but they also require a unity. And that has been called very much by the leaders who attended, and even those who did not attend but sent a high-ranking delegation of this to attend. How far do you think this is possible on the ground, unity among the Arab, even those who are up till this minute standing on their feet?
In theory, there are a lot of reasons for common Arab positions. What we see in this meeting, like many other Arab meetings, is that there is a search for the lowest common denominator, the minimum consensus amongst the countries of the Arab League. You don't see action towards change. You don't see any action towards producing a solution. You don't see anything towards taking a new initiative. You don't see anything about re-equipping the Arab system with new mechanisms for work, that the old instruments that the Arab League has been working with are no longer relevant. You don't see any of that. So you see the a willingness to stay as part of perhaps a pro forma, a kind of a charade, a kind of sense of appearance, to keep up a certain appearance with the neighbors. You want to say that here there is an Arab system, that there's some common Arab positions, but when you really go deep into those, you don't see any willingness to take action, to pioneer change, to pay the price.
Why?
For... Because people are interested in their own backyard. Every country has huge problems. People are not willing to pay the price of common action. There are no pressures on political leaders really to change, and the process of integration has not really gone as far as we expected. We expected much more integration in terms of economies,
right,
in terms of military cooperation. None of these files have moved.
Could there be any more pressures, more than we are in right now? I mean, here we have 5 countries who are totally in collapse state. We have the economic situation of many countries in enormous deterioration that we've never seen before. I mean, here, what more pressures do we need in order to find out a solution, or in order to find a strategy, in order to find what we can do about an Arab real common work at this particular time? What is hindering such an action?
It's an excellent question. I think we will see it in all of the independent media in the region and the world. It will be played out in the next few days. I'm sad to say that people are despairing, because this is not the first time that we've seen a summit that has not gone anywhere. It has happened. We've seen a deterioration in the mechanisms and the respect given to the summit. We've seen in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, we saw that leaders were coming for 1 hour to the meeting with their airplanes, the engines still on at the airport, and then they go back to the airport and leave. This is not a summit. We see the way summits are convened in other countries. They are well prepared. There is serious business, even if they do not agree. If it takes time, if it requires more efforts, that is right, announced to people. So public opinion also needs to be respected, that you need to be accountable to Arab public opinion. None of that's happening.
Yes, but why? The question is why. I mean, here, the Arab leaders, they do not sense how the situation is dangerous enough, even for their own backyard, as you speak of what you're speaking about. Do you think the Arab leaders are not aware enough that they are confronted by, I mean here, war in many countries that are surrounding them, just on their borders? What exactly is the situation here?
Awareness of a problem is not sufficient to behavioral change. You need many other factors. The countries in the region don't feel the pressure to rescind some of their current alliances. Some countries are aligned with other regional states, whether they be Iran whether they be Turkey. Whether they depend on their security on external forces. They know that if there is any common action that will require funding, it will be the oil-producing countries that will be saddled with the bill. They are not willing to do that. They realize that they are under tremendous constraints. The price of oil is down. They have their own populations that have requirements. They themselves are involved in conflicts now. Saudi Arabia is involved in a huge conflict in Yemen. It is involved in a huge conflict in Syria. So they are overstretched. So there isn't the incentive to change the behavior that you know to something new. And people don't see the rewards in this. You don't have any track record of huge success of common Arab action. So you will see that people would go towards cooperating with smaller groups of country for shorter periods of time on more limited issues. So you'll see what experts are calling temporary coalitions as opposed to more permanent alliances. So the Arab League is more like an old-fashioned alliance of countries. And you have new modalities now with a whole series of coalition agreements, coalition for fighting terror, coalition for the war in Yemen, coalition of Islamic states. A lot of these coalitions are competing, of course, with the old-fashioned Arab system.
So let's start with the Arab League in itself, since we're speaking about an old-fashioned or traditional council that is not fulfilling really what we aspire for. What is wrong with the Arab League? What does this regional body needs in order to revive or in order to find the salvation of Arab world? Is its charter, is it the influence of some countries over its decisions? I mean, what is wrong with the Arab League?
We need to understand a little bit of history, that the Arab League, when it was put together in the spirit not of the United Nations, but in the spirit of the League of Nations, which was formed after the First World War. The League of Nations was built upon the idea of respecting the sovereignty of individual states. It lacked the integrative kind of movement which you find in many other regional organizations now, like the African Union or the European Union. Now, as time goes by, you saw the Arab League expanding, taking on a lot of small states, very weak, some of them not even using Arabic as a lingua franca. So you saw Comoros Islands, you saw Djibouti, you saw Somalia, Mauritania's a case like that. Mauritania is a country of 3 million people living in a country the size of Egypt. So you get the picture of the kind of weak. You also have a group of countries that have been launched into repetitive crises. Countries like Sudan, Somalia, completely shattered. These are old crises. This is not the last 5 years where we saw another set of countries collapsing. With that kind of disintegration of the system, the Arab League could not really develop in the way other regional organizations. Now it needs to develop how? It needs to develop by creating a more effective decision-making mechanism that is not based on unanimous votes. It has to be based on the majority voting. It has to be based on a smaller number of states coming together, something similar to the Peace and Security Council that exists in the African Union. It needs some instruments for peacekeeping, for observing ceasefires, mediation, for economic assistance, for humanitarian assistance.
And that's another very important point. I guess that last summit we have heard about the Arab Common Forces. The Arab Common Forces that we have only seen nothing of it up till this minute. Only in Yemen, where it exists a model of this Arab force, but nothing new really happened. We know nothing about the future forces. Will it come into life, or would it stay as it is? What happened for those meetings? Are we speaking about a project that has been halted before it even began? What is the situation of the Arab Common Forces here?
Well, the idea was part of the agreements at Sharm el-Sheikh last year. The Arab chiefs of staff met after that, 2 or 3 meetings. And there was a protocol set for the force with a signature date. And in fact, some of the ministers of defense started arriving in Cairo for the signature. Then Saudi Arabia and a number of other Gulf countries requested a delay in the process. There hasn't been anything announced since then on any progress, except that in the preparations for this summit, the Secretariat of the Secretary General of the League and some other members of the Secretariat made statements saying that the force would have been on the agenda. Obviously, it was not on the agenda in the open meeting. It was probably discussed today in the closed meeting. Inconclusively, there is no consensus on the forming of the force, so it's probably been shelved or referred to further discussions, which doesn't mean very much. I would submit that the whole approach to the Arab force needs to be reviewed, that it needs to be done in a gradual manner, and it has to be done with the countries that are ready to go with it. There's no need to have the 22 Arab League countries involved, because more than half of those countries have no contribution to make. So I think it needs a different approach. I don't see the thinking on that crystallizing, but I do hope that somebody will come up. I'm sure that the new Secretary General of the Arab League, who is a very dynamic person, who is a very determined person, will make an extraordinary effort to move this forward.
Well, before going on to the conclusions of the Nouakchott meeting, or rather the Nouakchott Declaration, let us first have this report. And the 27th Arab Summit ended today with the adoption of a document, that's Nouakchott Declaration. Supposedly it was to give a unified position of the Arab League's member states on major issues. Let's watch the report and we'll come back for discussion.